The Fate of Ophelia stands as one of the most haunting, poetic, and psychologically layered songs Taylor Swift has ever released. Not because it simply references Shakespeare's tragic character, but because it rebuilds her story from the ground up, turning Ophelia into a mirror of every modern woman who has ever been misunderstood, silenced, romanticized, or drowned by the weight of someone else's expectations. And when the first notes of the song play soft, trembling atmospheric, the listener is immediately pulled into a world where water and memory blur together, where the past feels like a dream you had, but can't fully remember. And every word Taylor sings feels like a thread pulling you deeper into Ophelia's unraveling mind. The story within the song does not just retell Hamlet. Instead, it imagines Ophelia as a living, breathing soul who refuses to accept the version of her story that history wrote. In Taylor's interpretation, Ophelia becomes a girl caught between duty and desire, innocence and rebellion, the world's expectations, and her own longing to be understood. She is the girl who has been painted as fragile when she was only gentle, dismissed as mad when she was only overwhelmed, used as a symbol when she wanted to be a person. Taylor's voice gives Ophelia the chance to speak for herself for the first time in centuries. And as the song unfolds, you can almost imagine Ophelia sitting beside your wet dress, clinging to her skin. Flowers floating around her like silent witnesses. Eyes reflecting a lifetime of unspoken truths, and she begins to tell the real story, the one hidden beneath the poetry, the one that no playwright bothered to write. The script you're about to hear dives into that story expanded and reimagined, exploring the emotions, metaphors, and symbolic landscapes Taylor built within the song, stretching each image into a world of its own, until Ophelia is no longer a tragic footnote, but a universe of depth, heartbreak, and quiet defiance.
Right.
In this interpretation, Ophelia's world opens with a single moment, the second she realizes that everyone around her has already decided who she is. She feels the weight of labels placed on her: daughter, sweetheart, obedient, fragile, and in those labels. She feels her identity being shaved away piece by piece. Her father sees her as a pawn in political schemes. Hamlet sees her as both salvation and collateral damage. The court sees her as decoration. The world sees her as tragedy. But Taylor's storytelling changes all of that. Ophelia becomes a girl who wants to be known for her mind, her joy, her fire, not the softness that others mistake for weakness. She's the girl who sits up late writing thoughts she'll never share, whispering dreams into the darkness because she fears they will be stripped of meaning the moment someone else hears them. She becomes a representation of people who feel everything too deeply in a world that encourages emotional numbness. When she loves with devotion. When she is hurt, she hurts quietly in shadows because she has learned that her pain is inconvenient to others. As the script continues, imagine Ophelia standing in a dimly lit hallway of a castle that feels more like a cage. She hears rumors, whispers, doubts, judgments floating behind her like ghosts. She is watching the man she loves unravel before her eyes, wounded by the death of his father, consumed by revenge and spiraling thoughts. Hamlet becomes a storm she cannot stop, a tide she cannot swim against. He once used to look at her with a kind of golden affection, but now his eyes are sharp, distant, fogged by grief and suspicion. He pushes her away to protect her, but the push breaks something inside her, because she has built entire futures out of his promises. And yet Taylor's Ophelia does not collapse from heartbreak. She tries to anchor him, to understand him, to remind him of who he was before the world demanded so much from him. She becomes a lighthouse to someone who is already determined to drown himself in vengeance. And while she tries to save him, no one tries to save her. Her father monitors her behavior, turning every step into a performance for political gain. The palace walls echo with unspoken restrictions, expectations she didn't agree to, and she begins to feel her identity slip between her fingers, like river water. Taylor's Ophelia is not cracked by Hamlet alone, she is cracked by a world that refuses to let her be human. She wants to scream but is taught to smile. She wants to question but is taught to obey. She wants to love but is told how, when, and why she should love. Her voice becomes a quiet rebellion, a fire kept under her ribs. Then comes the breaking point, the moment Taylor paints so vividly in the song S-Bridge. Ophelia stands in a field of flowers near the riverbank, the scent of blossoms thick in the air, and she knows she cannot go back to who she was. The world has written too many versions of her story, weak, naive, crazy, and she refuses all of them. The water, in Taylor's metaphor, becomes both danger and freedom. To step into it is not to surrender, but to reclaim her narrative. She is choosing the only place where no one can follow her, no one can use her, no one can twist her intentions. She looks at the sky, a sky heavy with spring clouds, and she steps deeper, letting the cold wrap around her like an honest truth. The flowers float beside her, not as symbols of death, but symbols of release. Lavender for grace, willow for sorrow, daisy for innocence, poppy for sleep. With each step deeper, she feels lighter, as if the world's expectations were weights tied to her ankles, and the water is finally cutting the ropes. But Taylor's Ophelia does not drown. This is the key difference. This is the emotional rebellion at the heart of the song. She escapes the version of her story where she dies quietly. In Taylor's reimagining, Ophelia becomes a symbol of resurrection. She sinks beneath the surface, yes, but not to disappear. She sinks to shed the life that was forced upon her. Under the water, she feels the world blur away, the noise muffled, the pressure soothing. When she emerges on the other side of the riverbank, no one recognizes her, not even herself at first. She has washed away the illusions, the expectations, the chains of love that wasn't love but control. She walks into a future where her story belongs to her. The script now shifts into what comes after Ophelia's life beyond the myth. She wanders through villages where no one knows her name, orchards heavy with fruit, forests humming with insects. She learns to braid her own hair without thinking about who will approve. She sings songs without worrying who is listening. She writes down her thoughts not to hide them, but to understand them. She learns to live without the pressure of being watched. She learns to breathe without fear of disappointing someone. She learns to love herself, not as a fragile flower, but as a storm softened by kindness. As she travels, she meets other women whose stories were cut short by history, women labeled hysterical, troublesome, disobedient, dramatic. She sees pieces of herself in each of them. The girl who ran away from an arranged marriage, the woman who lost children to war and was told she cried too loudly, the widow who was blamed for her husband's mistakes, the daughter who wanted to become a scholar but was told it was foolish. Ophelia becomes a witness to their stories, their pain, their resilience. She starts writing them down in a small book she keeps hidden under her cloak. She collects their stories like pressed flowers, preserving their truths, their voices, the parts of them the world tried to erase. One night, sitting by a fire, she realizes that she is no longer defined by tragedy. She is defined by what she chooses next, and what she chooses is to tell her story, not the story the world wrote, but the one she lived. She begins writing her own life in ink, page after page, and as she writes, she feels the water within her heart settle into calm. Her identity reforms not as someone's daughter, someone's lover, someone's symbol. She becomes simply Ophelia, a girl with dreams, thoughts, flaws, opinions, and a voice that will not be silenced again. Taylor's song captures all of this in metaphors and poetic imagery, and in this script, those images unfold into entire worlds. The river becomes transformation, the flowers become memories. The drowning becomes rebirth. Ophelia's madness becomes clarity. Her silence becomes power. Her tragedy becomes triumph. And through all of it, the music swells like a heartbeat, steady, gentle, determined. In the final act of this story, Ophelia returns not to the palace that once confined her, but to the scene of her transformation, the river. She stands on the bank, looking at the water that once swallowed her fear and returned her freedom. She whispers a thank you, not because the water saved her, but because she saved herself. As the moon reflects on the surface, she feels whole, complete, and entirely alive. She walks away from the river, not as a ghost from literature, but as a woman of her own making. Taylor Swift's The Fate of Ophelia does not mourn a girl who died. It honors a girl who survived. And in that survival is the heart of the song, the message that even if the world writes you into tragedy, you can rewrite yourself into hope. You can reclaim your story. You can rise from the water with a heart made of storms and softness and truth. In the end, Ophelia is no longer a symbol of fragility. she becomes a symbol of rebirth. In this story, her true fate is only the beginning.